Hello and welcome to Obstacle Illusion. I'm Anna Klint, transformational healer, coach, and guide without my swag today. And I'm here with my great pal, April Gallagher, talking about obstacles and how they're illusions. And today we really want to talk about how your painful past can really lead to your purpose in life. And this is to say, if you want it to, and you're open to being that on that journey from that perspective. And this is what I have seen in my own life. April, do you agree that this is what you've witnessed in your own life, or at least in the lives of others? Like the discomfort?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's probably what even planted the seed for obstacle illusion and sacred optometry, is witnessing this so many times of these things that come up in your life that can either be the thing that becomes the obstacle to your growth, to your happiness, to your health, to your well-being, or the stepping stones, or the things that you transform, transmute, and they become the fuel to push you towards what ends up then feeling very much like you're on purpose. And and I feel like it also does that bonus of it helps when we think something was worth it, right? Like it helps. so it has that added bonus of like, oh yeah, that was a real shitty thing that I went through, but now I can see why. And it almost, not that it makes it all better, but it is kind of like the cherry on top.
Totally. And I'll even take it a little step further, or just clarify a little bit more of what you're saying. It's like that pain and that discomfort is the fuel for change, which unfortunately humans often need before we're going to make changes. We have to feel so uncomfortable. Like not everyone does. And I really applaud those people who make change before they're in a deep state of suffering. But what it also does is this, what you said, this transmutation. It's like you can, because you've been there, you gain some kind of expert status in being able to then help other people with that very same scenario, because you've actually done that transmutation work, and because you've walked through those flames, sometimes is what it feels like. It then allows you, once you're through them, on the other side, to reach that hand through and guide someone else through it. And that's, yeah.
Yeah. And on that, again, just like this, like cherry on top thing, is that in doing so, then you also become an inspiration, an example, right? Because when somebody's in that, they don't even think sometimes they don't even feel like it's possible to be out of it. So not only can you like extend your hand to assist them, you're also opening the door for them to see that it is possible, that
Totally.
it's not just that, it just opens up the realms of possibility.
It sure does. Yep. And then who knows, like, that person that you then guide through, like what amazing thing are they going to be able to do, because you opened up this realm of possibility for them, simply because you walked that ahead of them. I mean, it's profound.
Yeah.
It's deeply profound.
Yeah. I think that's probably why teachers do what they do.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
Because
totally.
there's like that sense of like, wow, watching so many people open up their lives.
Exactly. And so, all of this is just because I sent out an email recently about this client of mine, right? Joanne, who married a narcissist who was incredibly abusive to her. She had 3 incredible kids with this man, lived with, stayed with him for 20-ish years, a couple decades. And by the time she came to see me, she was suffering from chronic PTSD, and her hair was falling out and she was trembling and she was, having all kinds of physiological problems. She was getting sick. And not only that, of course, like she was emotionally and psychologically like eviscerated from being with this guy. And through our work together, she came to realize like, oh my God, my dad's a narcissist. my and she looked back, together, we looked through her family line, and so many women in her line had to make really hard choices about shacking up with men so that their kids would be fed, for instance, or things like that. I might be exaggerating a little bit, but had to make really hard choices at a time. And also, of course, where women didn't have a lot of the same opportunities that we have today. And she saw again and again, like these, women in her line, like making choices that led to, this legacy of narcissistic programming, so she finally came to realize, like, it wasn't her fault.
Mm-hmm.
She was only seeking out something that was familiar to her because it had been programmed in her family culture as being normal. And that was a game changer for her to realize, oh my God, this isn't my fault. There's not actually something wrong with me because I chose this man to be with, to be the father of my children. No, actually, there's nothing wrong with you.
Your microphone's on your
Is it making a lot of noise?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, it's the reason that email spoke so strongly to me is that I have a very close person in my life who I speak to multiple times a day, who's in that exact same situation, married to a narcissist in the process of divorcing. Her father is a complete narcissist. It's like exactly the same thing. And it's just like, it's amazing, like how similar these patterns are.
Exactly. And so many women are, wind up in that. And that's not to say that there are women narcissists who marry men and abuse those men, because of course that happens. But, it's somehow, a pretty potent part of our culture that, that we tend to breed narcissists, or that we have been breeding narcissists. I don't know like the origin story of the narcissist, so I can't speak to that.
It's in the water.
It's in the water. Okay.
So I mean, that's a very specific thing, narcissism, but in terms of, this kind of the journey we're on right now for obstacle illusion is, living a life of purpose. And so can we broaden this a little bit to look at, we talk about things being about these obstacles being illusions. And then we're talking about also a very kind of real thing that happens where you're kind of locked into a family pattern that has created a certain trajectory. And then now you're at this point where you're recognizing that you don't want that. You're at this pain point, perhaps, right? You recognize, I don't want my life to be like this. What the hell's going on? Like, oh, okay, there's these patterns. But then that can feel overwhelming too. Of like, well, how do I get out of like this has been going on for generations. Okay, yes, it's not my fault, but how do you go from just being like, this is a family pattern, I'm locked into it, there's nothing I can do, it's not my fault, like everybody in my family has done this up to this point, what hope do I have?
It's not my fault, but it's my responsibility from this moment forward.
Right. So is there what happens at that point? Like, is it an act of grace? Is it an act of will? Is it like in your experience? And I'm not sure I could even say this on my part. So I'm really asking, what you think, what is the catalyst, or what does it take? Or does it not just take one thing? Is it different for every person? Like, how does one go from, it's not my fault, but it is my responsibility? Like,
well, I think that it's different for everyone. And so I can definitely speak for me what it was, because I have inside information, and I don't have all the inside information of all my clients of like, why exactly did they choose to do this work when they chose to do it. I can guess and make educated guesses and have some insight, but I don't have all the insight. But
well, then why are we even talking? If you don't have all the insight, like why do I even bother talking to you?
Exactly. I don't know, because I thought you liked me.
Okay,
But as you're talking, it's like that Anais Nin quote, right? It's like, and where the bud finally decided, like, it just could no longer stay the bud and it had to bloom because it was so painful being so tight in that. And then of course it did this, this terrifying thing of going, everything so far I've been this bud, but now it's like pop. And it's like, oh, wow, look, that's a beautiful flower. But it's, in some ways, that's the dark night of the soul, right? When people come to it through the dark night of the soul, the suffering is so great and so intense that for some, not everyone who goes through the dark night, but for some, there came this moment where I was completely incapacitated. And so surrender was the only choice. And I didn't even know what I was surrendering to. I just knew I couldn't keep going the way I was going. And it was terrifying, unbelievably unsettling and terrifying. But the suffering was so great that it was going to lead me to my death if I didn't. Like, it was kind of a life or death kind of choice. And in that moment, I feel like my psyche just kind of like cracked, and it was like, whatever, I can't do anymore. I can't fight. I can't try. I can't effort. I can't pretend. I can't do any of that. And so there was this surrender. But that's not the only way that we get to that point, because, self-awareness can lead us to having these greater levels of understanding around ourselves. I think no matter what, you have to get to a point of self-awareness that says, this is not right for me. This is hurting me. How can I change it?
Mhm.
And that's different for everybody, right? Obviously, for my clients, they change it by working with me. And I changed it by working with someone else or a number of someone's or whatever, right?
Mhm.
And you change it over time by deepening your self-awareness practices. But there's all sorts of different avenues. I mean, you and I, just before we started, we were talking about ancestral healing as, in the case of something where you are in this obstacle like family pattern that goes back through time. Well, do that work through time, which isn't a real thing, and heal it at the root. And then that healing cascades forward because the original root cause is no longer a thing anymore.
Yeah.
And it was an obstacle until we had the awareness that it was an obstacle and that we chose to make it something different.
Yeah. And I think that that's a key point that I would like to make sure gets highlighted, right? That at this moment of awareness, when you recognize that, that moment of awareness of not my fault, but is my responsibility, that moment of awareness of this isn't working, I can do something different. And then you're seeking to do something different, that actually acts as a it's a tiny thing, but it has like exponential, it's almost like a magic thing. It has like exponential repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
And so although it can feel daunting to be under generations of family patterns, what I would like people to know is that with that awareness comes a ton of powerful magic, for lack of a better word, that it doesn't take then generations to heal. It doesn't take the rest of your lifetime to heal.
That's right.
It takes that moment of awareness and that choice to clear it. And it can be done so powerfully that it can actually in that instant be cleared. Definitely helped when you have somebody, I mean, for some people that can just happen, spontaneously, but that's the thing to know, is that like there is magic in that awareness, and there is that magic in that choice that that the buck stops here. And that it doesn't have to take then a lifetime to heal.
Correct. Yeah.
And in fact, it's not supposed to take a lifetime. It's supposed to be that moment you heal it, and then and then what do you do with it, right? Then
Right.
it
Right.
becomes, a lot of times there's so much focus on the healing that needs to take place. And I think in the past, it was the case that it did take generation, it did take your whole life to clear through something, but that's not where we are in humanity
Totally.
right now. Now it's like, you recognize it, you clear it, and what can you do with it? Right
Mhm.
now it's the blossoming.
Right.
And that's, I know, very hard to get yourself there if you're really stuck in the dark night, if you're really in that. But I do like to throw those seeds out there for people, so that it opens up that possibility to know that,
Mhm.
like, there is something great waiting for you on the other side.
Yeah, totally.
And this is just, and this thing that you're clearing, of the pain you're in, is not the point, and it's not your mission. It's just something that happens along the way, and
Mhm.
you can choose to address it, clear it, and move on, and not have this be your life purpose, because this isn't your life purpose.
Yeah, that's
Right?
right. Totally. Totally.
This little
It's just
pain
that,
ball is not your
right.
life purpose.
No, but it can be a treasure trove to mine from,
Yeah.
when we're talking about empathy, when we're talking about stepping into leadership, self-leadership, and then potentially leading others. That there's so, I always say that there's gold in there. Like anywhere that there's that pain point, there's gold to be mined and harvested and collected and cherished, because there's always wisdom in that experience. And whether it's just wisdom for you and your family, or whether you share it with your best girlfriend, or whether you do it on a larger scale, it doesn't matter. It's all really potent magic in a way. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, shall we open it up for the last couple minutes?
Sure.
Anybody has any questions or anything they'd like to add, anything they'd like to share? It's not a requirement, and we can definitely keep talking.
Yeah, I'm always curious about people's journeys of awakening, because not everyone had this dark night of the soul. Like, love, there are, awakenings that are steeped in love and that are transcendent, blissful type experiences as well. And then of course there's, like, I think the more gradual awareness shifting that happens through time, self-awareness, mindfulness practice that leads to awakening, which is a quieter, kind of path potentially, but just as deeply profound if, we're really talking about the journey being where it's at.
Yeah, mine
There's just
didn't go through a dark night of the soul, right? I was
right.
actually was thinking about this in a different way this morning. I was actually thinking about it in terms of one of my daughters, and how we are different. But I realized that, well, I'm just extremely observant. Like, I've always been extremely observant of my environment, of my physical environment, of the emotions and moods of those around me. I'm hyper aware of my surroundings. It makes it great for finding things, right? Because it's like I can just think about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember seeing something and it was out of place, and there it is,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm aware. But I think that is what led to my awakening, was not so much the dark night of the soul for myself, but observing, like my mother, observing those around me who were creating so much more suffering for themselves than they needed to, because they were looking at things in a certain way, or they weren't looking at things differently. And I think that's what led to all of the courses I've taken and the work that I've done, and all of the stuff that I've done was not so much because I was experiencing it, but because I was witnessing those around, because I knew what my experience was, and it was so different than those around me. And it was like, help me understand, like, and I had to then build those compassion pieces and those empathy pieces, because I wasn't experiencing that suffering, right? I had to better understand what it was like for somebody in that position. So,
Mhm.
so yes, I agree that the journey does happen differently, and it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be just this
Yeah.
one
Yeah, totally.
dark night.
Totally. I will posit though, with, it's funny, I actually don't know very much about your childhood for like how close we are, but when I hear you talk, like intuitively, like what I hear is that your childhood most likely was somewhat chaotic, either emotionally unstable, or um, there were facets of it um, that that induced you or that enticed you to be much more vigilant and aware of everything that was going on, so that you could, because you're saying like monitoring other people's emotional states as well as the physical environment, so that you could be safe.
Mhm.
And that early experience is probably what then led you down your seeking path of, you know, trying to figure out, like, how to feel comfortable in any kind of space, how to learn equanimity when people around you are, topsy-turvy, for instance. And that in itself, was this original kind of family pattern, perhaps, that sets you onto your spiritual path.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, that definitely is the case. Like I was a very,
Mhm.
yeah, my stepfather was very unstable
Mhm.
emotionally. He behaved like an alcoholic without the drinking, right? So you kind of
Mhm.
never knew what mood it
Mhm.
was going to be in, and you could say
Yeah.
something that you thought was funny, but then could result in, a plate being thrown across the room and smashing along so there was a constant this constant potential for
Right.
violence, even though it was never actually,
Mhm.
you know, even though he
Yeah.
never physically abused me. Yeah, so it was the case. And there was this sense of like, maybe it doesn't have to be this way, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Right.
And then, being concerned, of course, we're talking back to the patterns of like, not wanting to become him and not wanting to marry him, right? Like,
Mhm. Totally.
um,
Totally.
yeah,
I'd say you didn't marry him.
I didn't marry him. That's true. That's true.
That much I do know.
Although there have definitely been times where I've accused my partner of like, you're just like him, which isn't true, but there is that fear of like,
Yeah.
you can read a pattern in anything. So
Sure.
yeah,
Sure. That's the whole other topic, is
yeah,
like finding patterns that may or may not actually be there,
yeah.
because our brain wants it to be there.
Yeah, well, I'll write that down. Patterns on the way to purpose. And
Totally.
I think we're good. So
Yeah.
I say thank you for everyone for joining us. And
Yeah.
um,
And yeah,
yeah,
well, let's leave you with the question, which is, what are potentially the uncomfortable aspects of your own past, what we would call those pain points. What are those pain points that that have uniquely positioned you to step into your purpose, to your unique purpose, I guess is the question, talking very messy.
yeah, maybe you could write that a little bit more clearly and send it to me, and then I'll post that because I am going to get this one
All right.
uploaded. I still have some previous ones to upload, but I'll get this one uploaded today. So
Yeah.
do you want to try to do it a little bit more clearly? Or do you want me to re-say it?
Your unique pain points in your life are the breadcrumb trail to your unique purpose. So it's not a question, it's a statement. So the question then is, what has led you to where you are now, and how can you use that? And how can it use you
Mhm.
to further your purpose in the world?
Nice. Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. And
Yeah.
we'll see you again in 2 weeks. And I
2
believe
weeks.
Anna will do something with this video, and conversation I know always continues on the Mighty Network and all of that. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get it posted there.